Washington spent the early part of Wednesday digesting midterm results, but by the afternoon, President Trump changed the conversation by asking Attorney General Jeff Sessions to resign. The president and his chief law enforcement officer have been at odds since Sessions recused himself from the investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Mola Lengi reports.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has resigned. In his resignation letter, the Attorney General said he was doing so at the president's request. The president tweeted, "We are pleased to announce that Matthew G. Whitaker, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Jeff Sessions at the Department of Justice, will become our new acting Attorney General of the United States. He will serve our country well. We thank Attorney General Jeff Sessions for his service and wish him well. A permanent replacement will be nominated at a later date." The move comes just one day after Republicans secured control of the Senate, which will be needed in order to confirm Sessions' replacement. President Trump has publicly expressed his anger over Sessions' decision to recuse himself from overseeing Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election.
It would create a constitutional crisis if this were a prelude to ending or greatly limiting the Mueller investigation. And I hope President Trump and those he listens to will refrain from that.
President Trump insisted Wednesday that he has no interest in stopping the Mueller probe.
I could fire everybody right now, but I don't want to stop it because politically I don't like stopping it.
Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker will now take over the Mueller probe from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Mola Lengi, CBS News, the White House.
White House columnist for The Hill, Niall Stanage, is in Washington. Niall, thanks for joining us. Back in September, the president told your colleagues at The Hill he doesn't have an attorney general. Can you remind us why President Trump held such animosity towards Jeff Sessions?
He essentially blames Jeff Sessions for the whole Mueller probe. Sessions obviously recused himself after it became apparent that he had had contacts with the Russian ambassador to the US. At his prior Senate hearings, he had denied having such contact. That ultimately paved the way for his recusal. The president has held him responsible for not being as loyal as President Trump would wish his attorney general to be. And of course, that goes to a very fundamental split in how the job of the Attorney General is viewed, whether it's an impartial office holder or someone who's there to do the president's bidding.
Certainly was not a secret that the president did not hold Jeff Sessions in high regard. But if you look at the timing of this, what can you tell us about why you think the president decided to do this today?
Because there is no immediate electoral implications, is the short answer. The president, as you say, has been very unhappy with Jeff Sessions for a long time. This is a bit of a bombshell today, but it's a bomb that had a very long fuse burning for a long time, for months on end. President Trump was talked out of firing Jeff Sessions basically because of fears that it would have a detrimental impact on Republicans running in competitive races in the midterm elections. President Trump clearly feels emboldened by the result of those elections and didn't want to waste any time in moving against Mr. Sessions.
Well, the new acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker will now oversee the Mueller investigation. Based on what we know, do you think that the future of the special counsel is in jeopardy?
So there's two ways of answering that. One is, could he just bring an end to the probe? I think that is probably unlikely, simply because the political firestorm that it would ignite would be so devastating. But that isn't the only thing that Mr. Whitaker could do. He could starve the special counsel of resources. He could very tightly limit its scope. He could otherwise just make life difficult for Bob Mueller. And I think that is probably the more likely outcome, because that would not cause such a political furor.
Well, earlier in the day, the president spoke to reporters in a wide-ranging news conference. As someone, Niall, who has had the chance to observe the president up close multiple times, I wonder what you saw today and heard in the way that the president answered questions.
It was a really interesting occasion today, Elaine. Obviously, it was a rather long press conference. He answered a lot of questions. He got into very confrontational exchanges with reporters. But at the same time, he was talking about bipartisanship. He was talking somewhat more, in a more friendly manner, toward Democrats, not so much of the kind of fire and brimstone that we heard on the campaign trail aimed at Democrats. So suggesting there could be some way of working together, but as always with President Trump, we'll have to see how the words match up to the actions in that respect.
That's right, because he seemed to indicate that if there were to be any investigations, that would be a non-starter.
Yes, absolutely. He was very emphatic on that point. And not only that it would be a non-starter, but that any Democratic investigation or Democrat-led investigation would instigate a counter-reaction from him or from Republicans, suggesting that the Republican-led Senate would investigate Democrats for some form of alleged malfeasance.
Finally, I want to ask you, Niall, about the midterms. In your latest piece, you write about Tuesday's winners and losers. What were your main takeaways, and what do you think those results tell us looking ahead to 2020?
So I wish I had a really simple answer to that, but I think one of the things that many of us have been grappling about with the midterm results is that they sort of elude easy definition. President Trump we had as mixed, neither a winner nor a loser, because obviously Republicans losing the House is a very big deal. At the same time, he seemed to be effective on the campaign trail, and the losses in the House are to some degree offset by Republican gains in the Senate. So it's a split verdict, and I think that's really the critical point, even as President Trump claims that it's some kind of vindication of him.
And looking ahead to 2020, are there any lessons that can be learned as we move forward and look to that?
There are some. One thing that I think augurs quite badly for President Trump was the relative ease in which Democratic senators in the Rust Belt won re-election. We look at states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan that were so pivotal to President Trump's victory in 2016. Democratic senators in those states really got elected pretty comfortably. So that is a worrying sign for the president, even as he talks about his own tactics and his own presence on the campaign trail as something that can energize Republican voters.
It's a really good point. We'll see if the president decides to adjust tactically, perhaps, as a result of that. Niall Stanage, thank you so much. Great to have you.
Thank you.